Okay, good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, March 27th, 2019. We are in the Freeport High School Library. We have everyone in attendance but Jeremy. He is out of town on work this evening, but we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the March 13th, 2019 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Maddie, Maura, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda?
I only have one. I'd like to move the budget discussion up before the policy review, and that way that would allow some of the administrators to go home a little earlier.
All right. Anybody have an issue with that? Okay. So we will move right into good news and recognition and start with Clay.
Hello, everybody. So from FHS, the athletic news is that all spring sports preseason practice started the Monday of this week. And this includes lacrosse, tennis, baseball, softball, and outdoor track. Freeport sports teams are looking as best as they have in years, and games will start before you know it. And for the academic news, the Freeport Latin Club recently hosted a Junior Classical League convention. Miss Taylor and all of her Latin students were very excited about this matter, along with all the other Latin students across the state that attended. And they enjoyed a great competition ranging from volleyball to Latin trivia. And I have photos if anyone wants to look through those.
Is it like Latin volleyball or?
I don't know. I wasn't there. But
The picture?
probably. And for the arts, a student here, Dina Arison, had an art piece that was named, quote, Best in Show by the Maine Junior Duck Stamp competition held at Ella Bean on the 25th. And our students' artwork publication, it's called The Clarion, is currently accepting submissions for creative poetry or other artwork, but it's under the topic of like dreams, I think she said it was. And so they're currently accepting submissions for that. And so yeah, that's a chance to be printed in the issue of this year. And that's all for good news and recognition.
Some of these pictures are right. Thank you, Clay. All right, so next we move on to Nordic skiing.
And I think Craig is going to say a few words about how our teams did this year. They did very well.
Yeah, we're here tonight to recognize some championship experiences by a few of our student athletes. First, we had a two-time individual state champion, Lily Horn, in Nordic skiing. She was the classical and pursuit champion, so she'll get her name on a banner in our gym. And second of all, we have the boys Nordic ski team here, as they were the Western Maine Conference champions, and John Giddens was also the individual champion in the Western Maine Conference meet. So congratulations to them, and I'll turn it over to you folks.
You can read their names, though.
Okay.
I didn't bring a list.
I don't have the list.
Oh, you don't have it?
No,
Oh,
I didn't bring a list.
It's right here.
Okay.
That way they can hear it on the mic.
The first is Lily Horn. She was unable to make it, but I'm sure her mother would love to come up and receive it. Her brother will come up. This is Martin Horn.
Please congratulate Congratulations.
Members of the boys Nordic Western Maine Conference championship team, we have Elias Dorsey. John Giddens. Noah Height. Martin Horn.
Made you come up twice, sorry.
Caleb Hunter. Sam Robinson. And Tom Robinson. And the last member, Henry Southall. Take those.
One more round for all of them.
Yep, and before I get rid of the mic here, I'd just like to thank the coaches, Joel Hinshaw and Delisha Dyer as well.
Okay. So next on our agenda is public comment. So if you would like to share something with the board, we ask you to come up to the microphone. Just let us know your name, where you're from, and we ask you limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Or does she go under the exchange?
Well, I guess it depends on what she wants to talk about.
It's a public comment.
Okay.
I just wanted to let the board know that the town of Durham is writing a new comprehensive plan, and they've had lots of, well, Michelle, you were there, you knew. We had a meeting on Monday night. There were a couple people who said that the reason they moved to Durham was because of the school system.
They did say it's nice to you.
Hi there, Cap Wallingford. I'm a Freeport resident, mother of 3. Asking the board to rethink their proposed spending and not vote on the current budget. I have been talking to quite a few people. I know you all work very hard. I cannot do what you do. I say it every time I come up on the microphone. I probably have a cardiac arrest. It's just too much money. I moved here 10 years ago, and I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening to this moved here approximately similar timing. My taxes have gone up 75%. We're making ends meet. We're doing fine, but can I possibly use that other amount of money to potentially put my child into a better college? Lots of other opportunities. We're pricing Freeport into the Falmouth area, and it's making me really sad. It's making me sad to see folks that are just trying to make ends meet, thinking about it's time for us to move elsewhere as soon as our kids graduate, or even beforehand. And it's too much money. I don't care if positions have to be cut that are not teachers. I don't care if we have to drive an old rickety bus as long as it passes inspection. If it means that perhaps we have more students in one special ed class, let's do it. I'm very concerned with the proposed budget. Also, redundancy. When RSU was formed, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I'm not sure how many years now it is, there was a superintendent and an assistant superintendent. There was people concerned about their positions being eliminated. Shannon was the superintendent at the time, and I'm doing lots of historical things that I've talked to the old timers, and I'm kind of in that classification now too. What is the history? Why do we have a superintendent, assistant superintendent, and then an assistant secretary to the superintendent and the assistant superintendent? And it was redundancy because RSU was established and we didn't want to step on people's toes, is what I've been told. I feel there's too much hierarchy here. And I really think that one of those positions potentially could be eliminated. So that could be the start. I think we need to look at corporations for supporting our fields and our spending. There's ways we can make money. Our lovely FPAC, which is utilized quite well, and it is rented. If we went to someone who actually knew how to market that, we could bring money in that way. There's ways to bring money in besides spending more. So just a thought. I really do ask you reconsider it before you vote in the budget that you've all spent hours and hours planning on. So thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Okay. So we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. I want to remind the board that your next opportunity for a learning walkthrough is at Mass Landing on May 3rd at 10:15. Please contact Principal Grimm if you are planning on attending this week. Also, just a reminder about the three-town leadership meeting tomorrow evening at the Freeport Community Center, and that'll be at 6 o'clock. I have one retirement to report this evening. Nadia Pearson, third grade teacher at Mass Landing School, will be retiring at the end of the year. And then I have 3 resignations to report this evening. Bridget Anderson, the child care coordinator of Laugh and Learn. Dan Breton, the custodian at Freeport High School. And Karen Walker, the food service assistant at Freeport High School. We do have lots to celebrate this evening. As Clay mentioned, we have many awards recently given to our arts students by the Maine Disabilities Council and the Maine Junior Duck Stamp, and we will be recognizing these students in April to learn more about that. Our Mass Landing math team, under the coaching of Scott Weber, received first place at a recent competition. This competition was comprised of 30 teams, which were made up of 180 students in the Southern Maine Elementary Math League on March 15th, and our students came in first. So that's quite the honor, and congrats to the coach and students. And then we just recently learned that Nicole Hughes, our STEM teacher at DCS, that some of you recently had the learning walkthrough with, has been accepted to attend the Science and Engineering program for teachers at MIT. And this program is a week-long immersion program in the summer into the best of what MIT has to offer for our math and high school science teachers and middle school. She was chosen out of all of the Maine applicants to receive a full scholarship to attend the program. And so we are very excited for Nicole and for the learning that we expect that she'll be bringing back to our students and our staff. And lastly, today I was able to attend the kindergarten afternoon with specialists at Moore Street School, and it was quite the treat. And I wrote a little poem. I was so excited. Kindergartners joyfully sang, boom whackers loudly rang, self-portraits artfully framed, PE feathers balanced and tamed. Moore Street Kindergarten, you're bound for fame. And so that concludes my report for the evening.
Very nice.
It was quite the experience. Lots going on.
Very nice. Okay. I think it's actually back to you, because the next we have is administrative reports, and I think you're going to fill in for Michelle for finance.
I am, and it's just going to be a brief report to say that if you look at your purple sheet in your packet, we're right on par for the year, and Michelle has also started doing projections for the end of the year, and we're in very good shape.
Okay, thank you. All right, so board comments and committee reports. So we do have our board information exchange and agenda request on here. If anyone had anything that they wanted to share or request further information on, or they had any committees that have met since the last time we reported out that they'd like to share on, now would be the time. All right. Finance Committee, Kate.
Okay. We've met, I think, 4 times now, if you include tonight since the last time I reported out. We continue to work on the funding formula. Where we're at with that right now is we moved on. I think I reported last time that we finished our fact-finding research portion, and we've now started, we made a list of all the different potential variables. We went through, did pros and cons of each. We made sure we pulled up and made a list of all the different factors that we were asked to consider either by the RPC plan or the town councilors or select boards. We are starting now to look at different ways to set up the formula, and we're thinking confidently that we could have a recommendation sometime in May. But we don't expect this to be implemented for this year's budget. And the reason being that we will have already voted on the budget, knowing what to expect in terms of an estimated tax impact, and we just think it would be better for the board, especially if we get hung up in the approval process, that we just look to implement this for the fiscal year 21, which would be next year's proposed budget. There were a couple other things that we've covered other than cost sharing. I think there were some things about just closing out the donations from the Tri-Town Track and Field Committee, and what to do with some of the pavers. We do have some pavers that were placed into the entrance area with names on it for people who had put in donations or pledges, and some of them we've not collected in full. And so we had a discussion about, if a family has not fulfilled their pledge, what do we do with the brick that's been placed? We thought we would at least try to make another attempt now that it's in the RSU 5's been handed over to RSU 5. RSU 5 will make one more attempt to collect, and if we don't collect, we were floating the idea of, because we do have a couple more pavers to place, that we would pull the pavers of those who have not fulfilled their pledge and replace it with those that have, with the newer pavers. So it wouldn't be any added expense, because you have to go in basically and remove a paver to put in a new one. So we would just pull those as we get new contributions. So that was that, and I think that's pretty much it that we've been, it's basically been all cost sharing meetings. We did review some bids for the PA system on the field, and I think we've got some things later on in the meeting to address that, but it basically we had to go back and revisit kind of the initial plan that we had for the PA system, because we had been looking at, I think we had made in our agreement with the community members that surround the field that we wouldn't place the speakers a certain way, and then when the bids came back, it didn't look like that could quite work. So I think you had a meeting with them, with the community members, to work that out, and I think we'll discuss that later. And I also am doing policy shows. Should I go into policy, unless there's questions on finance? Okay. Policy is pretty straightforward. You're going to have policies to review here shortly. At our last meeting, we make sure I'm not missing. We didn't have any that we reviewed with no changes recommended. We're bringing forward 3 new policies for first read tonight: student fundraising activities, student activity funds, and homework. And then there was another policy that we didn't get to, that's student code of conduct. So we'll we're bringing that back to the committee meeting for April 5th. And I think just to add a little intro to what you're going to be seeing tonight for the first read, we did a lot of changes to the student fundraising activity policy, and there was a lot of input from administrators and back and forth, and that's why it's, I think it was on the agenda at one time to be brought to the board prior to this, but we felt it needed more work, and so I feel the committee's done their due diligence and we're ready to present that to you. That's all I have for tonight. For now.
For now. All right. So now we're going to jump right to 12, unfinished business?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, before you do your consideration of the budget and vote, I just wanted to give one last update, and in your packet, I guess I would direct you to the purple sheets. You have some updated pages as of today. So the very latest revisions include the addition of the $32,000 for field trips or field work. The Region 10 final budget was lowered to a 33% increase, which equates to like $24,927. Our workers' comp just came in lower than we had expected, so that's an additional savings of $35,000. And then I reported the retirement this evening, so that is saving us a little bit. The one unknown is still the exact amount for the property and casualty. And all of this lands us at a 3.43% expenditure increase and a 4.15% tax impact increase. And also in your packet tonight, we always add, before you vote, we, on the last page of the supplemental handout, are the individual tax impacts to each of the towns. So if you would turn to page 10, you will see that that will end up impacting Durham with a 2.99% increase. Freeport would be at a 2.68%, and Pownell would be 2.86%. And then I just also want to direct your attention to, you have a new updated white sheet because of all of these changes to the article. So when you're thinking of adopting, that's the page you should be referencing. And I think that those are all of my updates for the budget.
Valerie.
So Becky, thank you so much. Do you have the final amount of savings since the last time? You mentioned 3 items that produced savings since we met last. And I was trying to tally them, but I lost track.
Workers' comp, 35K.
Yeah, I have that one.
The 30.
I think that's the only one she gave the dollar amount on.
Yeah.
So, right, that was an additional savings of 35, but we would have to subtract what we had in the previous budget for Region 10. I don't have a total.
So it looks like for the Region 10 piece, our last one from last week had it at 34.7, and this one has it as 24.9, so roughly $10,000 there.
And the retirement, I think, equates to just like $2,000 or $3,000, and I think those are the ones. Region 10, Michelle is online. She's not able to be with us tonight, but she's saying that's $9,756 for Region 10.
She didn't like my $10,000 estimate. I guess that's why she's the director of finance, right? No rounding.
You're welcome.
Okay, so so this includes the 2 items that we had discussed last week and added, asked her to include in this week's warrant articles. And we didn't have this one last week, the article by article, but this is essentially what we will end up signing once we've adopted this. And then this is the document that essentially goes to the tri-town meeting on May, oh boy, should have known that before I started my sentence.
I think it's in this packet.
May 20-something or other. And then 22nd, okay, May 22nd here at Freeport High School in the gym, where we vote article by article for what's going to go out to referendum in June. So if everyone is comfortable with what we discussed last week and is ready to move forward, actually, I would probably say we should take a motion. Let's read this properly here. Take a motion for consideration and adoption of the superintendent's FY20 recommended budget as presented. So that as presented is this revised white sheet. To get it on the floor, John? Second? Maddie? Thank you. Okay. So if everyone's comfortable with the work we did last week and moving the budget forward, we are welcome to vote. If somebody has a change or discussion.
I would like to have a discussion based on the new updated information and savings about the bus driver for the buses that would allow our students to not either leave school early and miss class at the end of the day, miss practices which can or sometimes cannot be rescheduled at the end of the season, and also allow the teams that actually have to travel to practice to not miss practice so frequently. And that happens very frequently with teams like the alpine ski teams in both schools, middle school and high school, and also with the Nordic teams, which have to practice on snow, and oftentimes they're not able to because there's no transportation. And when I look at the numbers, the savings that we have outpace the cost of adding the bus driver.
Yes.
Polly, do you have a number amount for that?
The cost to add the bus driver would be $40,000. The savings that we have captured since last week is about $46,000.
So basically what Valley's referencing on the prioritization request that I don't think we ever got an updated one of these guys, right? So is there a new one today?
No, there's not a new one
Okay.
today, but we've updated that once. Remember when we put the pre-K to the forefront?
Okay, but we didn't change the amount, right? So,
Correct.
okay. So this February 26th is the most recent one, and the item we're talking about was originally on this list B. So the second item in the third priority, the section that had not been included in the budget based on the conversations last week, and Ray's gracious answer that he was willing to move it behind the field work, it became the third. So that would be the first item on the list that has not been included in the budget. So presuming that the math works such that our savings were more than that 40, I don't know. I'm sure Michelle is quickly calculating the addition of $40,000 to the purple sheet from today to see what that looks like if that was to be added. So while she's doing that, do folks have commentary on the bus request?
So would the amount for the budget kind of almost equally revert back to what it was at the meeting last week? I don't have that in front of me, but
I had it last week. The expenditure increase was 3.57 with a tax impact of 4.34. So presuming that none of the other factors change between then and now, if we added back in 40, I don't see us being above those numbers, probably slightly below.
I don't have I totally understand what Valley's saying. I think it's a very valid problem that we have. I just feel like at this point where we got to the point, we got up there and then we were able to do a little bit of kind of savings. I think we owe it to the taxpayers to kind of keep that as a gift, especially when it's already there's already an increase. Not saying that it's not a completely valid use of money, and hopefully it would be something that would be the first thing on the budget next year, but I think that we owe it to the taxpayers this year to keep it where it is.
Mark?
So I don't disagree with the prior speaker, but it does concern me, and I think I would be frustrated as a parent if I had my kids pulled out of school due to lack of buses. So to me, that's like a basic thing that we should be doing, is allowing our kids to be in school when they can be, and then not have to be pulled out of class just because we don't have a bus and a driver.
And I don't know if this is a number that Craig has at his fingertips. I would be interested in knowing how frequently is this really an issue? I mean, I know I experienced it for middle school soccer in Durham once, maybe twice, games that we had to not play because we didn't have a bus. But I'm curious of, how prevalent is the issue?
I think he's coming up.
He's coming.
While he's coming up, Michelle says that would be 3.55% to the expenditure with the 4.30 tax impact.
So I don't have a number that I can go and look up. My master schedule is full of pencil, so to go back and try to decipher which pencils marks are changes in the busing that we had to do because of drivers. So so my estimate would be at least once or twice a week that we're doing that to some school, some team, somewhere.
Is there, and in a perfect world, it doesn't happen at all. In a slightly less perfect world, it doesn't happen to one team any more often than others, right? So if it's every team misses a game or so a season, I'm less heartbroken than if, gosh, our Nordic team, 1 out of 3 practices they can't get to because of busing. I think that's more, for me, that's more of an issue.
It happens to middle school, probably not to high school at all because of the
They get the
varsity,
priority,
because of the
right.
varsity heel points, playoffs, wins and loss counts, and trying to move varsity games. And so what happens is we cancel or postpone a middle school game, look to reschedule, which you play Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's so what happens is at the end of the middle school season, there are games that we had to cancel or postpone or reschedule, and they don't happen because the season's over and we're getting ready for the next one.
So is any one specific middle school team more heavily impacted than others, or is it a couple of teams?
It's just random. It's whatever day we don't have a driver, and it could be the same team twice. It could not be one team the entire year. It's just that given day and that number of buses we got going out and the number of drivers we don't have.
One suggestion could be to really track the data for a year and then look at it next year in next year's budget.
Right, where you keep a list every time you have to bump something because of busing. In pen. He looks really excited about that, yeah. Amongst all the other things you're doing.
Can you stay for 1 second?
Yeah.
So I guess what you just said made me think, we're talking a driver, right? A driver.
We have buses, it's the drivers.
Right, it's the
yeah.
driver. So it would be high. So you don't use that. Even hiring another driver doesn't seem like it maybe would always fix it, because that's like an added. You pick up those shifts, right? For lack of a better word. I mean, is there a chance that you still wouldn't have enough drivers even if we hired another driver? that not enough people would sign up for those, or is that more of the issue, or is it literally like a body?
A body.
It is a body.
Yeah.
That would be like their
And the bodies, so on any given day, I can schedule between all three schools, 3 buses, a fourth if it can be a drop-off, because that fourth is the emergency bus. If a regular route bus breaks down, they need to have one to go pick them up, continue the route. So that fourth emergency bus we use to take kids to Pineland, because if on the way to Pineland a bus breaks down, it's close enough to get back. So that emergency bus can be used for NYA, for Yarmouth, maybe Falmouth, depending on the season. You know, if it's the winter, probably not. But spring and fall, where it's not cold, we could probably go as far as Falmouth. But that's all 3 schools, and there's games, so it's tough. And then in the winter, so we have 2 or 3 reliable spares that do our trips, and then 2 or 3
Drivers,
others.
not buses, right?
Drivers, yes. We have 2 or 3 spare bus drivers who are always kind of available. There's a couple more that also drive for Brunswick, and they drive for other schools. And then when they're driving for other schools, and in the wintertime, our bus drivers get sick, then those spares are pulled to run the regular routes, and now we don't have the drivers for after school. And it's just not our problem. We had a basketball game here this winter, and it was Greeley, and it was a first team game that was supposed to start at 3:30, and it got to be 3:20, and they weren't here yet. So I called the AD, and he said, "Yep, we didn't have a driver. We had to take the Nordic team to Pineland first, and then come back and do a shuttle." So it's statewide.
Do we have any estimate of, so is this a full-time position? Is it a part-time position? I know it's split between a couple of things, but.
It's a full-time position.
Okay. And do we have a estimate of how much time would be driving versus how much time would be other maintenance and?
No, we didn't calculate it that way.
Well,
So last week when you guys presented, you mentioned the fact that the driver would be doing maintenance and cleaning at the high school during the day. And I remember last year, this is something that Dennis had in his priority request, and we weren't able to include it in the budget. So I see this as doing double purpose, just fulfilling the request to maintain the high school clean and also to allow our students to get to games and practices in a timely fashion without losing school time, which is really what we want to avoid.
It wouldn't be necessarily at the high school. It would just be wherever it's needed.
So in my mind, during a season, that person would be the first person. If we only had one bus going out, then that person would drive that. We hardly ever have just one bus going out. But in my mind, this person would be the full-time bus driver and would probably be assigned the longest trips to Freiburg. And I haven't done the math, and we don't have the numbers, but that's almost a full-time job when you take a trip from here to Lake Region and back, and you do that 5 times, five times a week, and then the other times they would be used either maintenance or custodial, wherever the biggest need would be.
So trying to split the position and say, okay, we'll fund only half of it because that's the driving part, that's not accurate. It's mostly the driving. So cutting the position down wouldn't serve the purpose of driving whenever necessary. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think we would find someone to be our driver if it wasn't a full-time position. I mean, that's kind of like our subs now. He would be a sub if he's only going to drive.
Okay.
Or she.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kate, just so you're up to speed on what we're discussing, the purple sheets include, I didn't see when you popped out, but the purple sheets include the pre-K and the 32 of field work, along with the other adjustments that have come to light in the last week. So the 3.43 on the purple and the 4.15 include those items. And there was a question about if the, based on some other savings in workman's comp and bus retirement and Region 10, there was savings of about $46,000. So the question was if we included the bus driver, that next priority item, to offset those other savings, what would those look like? And the expenditure would be back up to 3.55, just below where we had it last week, and tax impact would be 4.3. So at this point, we had a motion on the floor and a discussion about the bus. If the will of the board is we could make a motion to adjust the budget and vote on the motion. And then if it passes, it would now, the original motion would be amended, and then we would vote on that. So that's just sort of the technical piece. I'm going to look at Lindsay, my Robert's Rules expert, for exactly how it works, because sometimes this gets a little tricky when you have amendments to amendments and things like that.
We only currently have one motion
Right.
on the floor
It's on
to
the original budget.
pass the original budget.
Yes.
So we haven't yet heard an amendment.
We have not.
Yeah, okay.
I was
someone
doing it
like
in
to make an
preparation for
amendment?
Valley's hand being up.
Can't we do a straw poll? Can we do a straw poll?
You could.
No, I'm just
Or
saying.
if someone
I'm
could
asking.
make-
I'm not saying. I'm asking.
Yeah.
We could, one could, yeah.
It looks like that was going to make something.
I think because there's a motion on the floor, probably makes most sense to make an amendment if we want to go that route rather than do a straw poll.
And then
Well,
vote
there's a
on
motion,
amendment,
yeah. So, having said that, I make a motion that we add 40,000 to the budget for the purpose of hiring a bus driver.
Okay, do we have a second? Maddie. All right. Anybody else have any other questions or comments they want to make before we vote on the amendment? Okay. I think my take on, I'm torn, right? Because I think it's important that the kids are able to get to the events that we've scheduled for them and taken the time to get them ready for. I do want to minimize the time they're out of school, you know, if we're taking them out sooner. But I also appreciate the idea of, you know, just because we found some savings doesn't mean we have to spend them. And, you know, leaving it where we brought it, you know, at an expenditure increase of below 3.5, I think can make a lot of sense. So it's kind of my, yep.
I really like Becky's suggestion of getting more data. I mean, $40,000 is a ton of money, and I mean, I have no idea what size of problem that's addressing, and that makes me uncomfortable. However, in theory, I want enough buses to get kids where they want to go. I'm uncomfortable with the lack of information on this topic. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right. Oh, Maddie, yep.
I'd heard about the issue before. I think we haven't heard about it because it was in the third tier of priorities. I mean, it doesn't mean the problem hasn't existed. I think it's been a problem for a while. We just haven't heard about it because we heard.
No,
the
I don't mean I
prioritized
haven't heard
requests.
about it. Our athletic director wasn't able to give us a number of incidences where this was a problem. I mean, it could be 3, it could be 35, and if it's 3, I'm not in favor of spending $40,000 to solve the problem. If it's 35 incidences affecting hundreds of kids, missing class 35 times, I mean, it's just, I don't know the scale of the problem.
All right, are we ready to vote on the amendment? So there's an amendment on the floor to add $40,000 to the proposed budget for the addition of a additional bus driver. All those in favor? I'm just having you keep your hands up because she's got to do weighted voting, so. I know, but she's writing it down, so I'm giving her the opportunity.
Thank you, I'm good.
Okay. Opposed? Okay, so that amendment does not pass. So we are back to the original motion on the floor to pass the budget as presented. Any other items people want to raise, discuss, consider? Yeah.
I'd just like to make a comment that the request to cut the budget substantially and the brainstorm list that were sent to the board, I would like to acknowledge and thank the person for making the suggestions, and that I personally thought over all of them, and don't believe at this time that those would be the right cuts for the district. I pretty much just disagree with the magnitude and severity of the impact on learning that would be caused by those cuts. But I do appreciate the creative thinking and all the ideas, because we're always looking for ideas how to streamline the budget. And there were some new ones in there that I really hadn't thought about until they arrived in my email box, so thank you.
And from a logistics standpoint, just so it's easier for members of the public, if you want to reach out to the board, there is an email that's board@rsu5.org, and it goes to every member of the board, so you don't have to have everybody, type in everybody's email. So keep it simpler for people that want to reach out and share their ideas. So I will echo Lindsay's appreciation for the time that was put into that and the thinking. It's great to have other people's insights and, like, oh, I hadn't really thought about something like that. So, all right. Let's go with Kate, just because we haven't heard from her yet.
Maybe this was covered when I stepped out, but did we have an update on what the $32,000 for field work, what the expectation of what that will cover, so we're all clear on that?
You did not, but I did come prepared for that question. So. Is Ray here tonight? Oh, there's Ray.
I love that he looked around when you said, "Is Ray here?"
I'm just going to have him come up and comment a little bit once I kind of go over this table with you. Basically, what we did was allocated with the additional $32,000 with the money we already had in the budget that we were reallocating for this coming year. We spread it out, K to 2. We counted and gave $10 per student, and then 3 through 9 we gave $41.30. That was after I spoke to Principal Gulko about, she thought it would be nice to have something with the 9th grade transition, but we didn't really see the need to allocate the money for the 10 through 12, and so that's kind of where we arrived and how we have put the money in the budget. And then I just kind of ask each principal to think about, and I've shared that table with them about how that would impact the cost of the field trips. And I think the biggest question was around Freeport Middle School, so I just asked Ray to be prepared to speak to it, so I'll hand it over to him.
So, and definitely as a middle school principal, very appreciative of, that amount of money. It would make a huge difference in, the field trips, we go on and how we fund them. And looking at the two kind of big ticket field trips that we have are Kiev and Acadia, where Kiev is $150 that's charged to parents, and Acadia is $125. The difference between the two is Kiev, we take everyone, and it is there's no program offered within the school. The Acadia, we offer, we try to create a program at the middle school and create a program up at Acadia and give the kids the choice. And everyone has gotten the choice that they've wanted in the past. It's not always going to work out that well for us, but in the past it has. And that one's $125. In looking at kind of if we went down to charging $50 to the kids for each one of that, that would leave, and then the district, all of that district money going solely to those 2 field trips, would leave us some, right around $10,000 that we still would need to raise. And if you look at the current, like the magazine drive is $5,500, then you're at $4,500. So then you would be looking at, what other fundraisers the PTC do, what other fundraisers do we do, what other, can we kind of stretch to get that as close to 50 as possible. I feel pretty comfortable that we get somewhat closer, quite a bit closer to that. We might not be able to hit that in year 1, but we would be a lot closer to that target number. But I can tell you we will not be at that target number in year 1. Okay.
Any other questions for Ray before he runs away? Nope, you're good.
All right.
Did you only want Ray to share? Given
All of the
impact.
administrators are here, and I think they're happy to talk to it if you want to hear from each of them, but I feel like that was where the biggest impact was, so I'll leave that to the board.
Okay. Raleigh?
So I wanted to thank the administrative team for having done such a great job putting this budget together for us and simplifying what we have to do over here to approve the budget. So many, many thanks for that. There are a couple of things that I wanted to mention moving forward. One thing in the budget that I'm personally hoping can change in the future is having our hands tied because of accreditation issues in terms of teachers that need to be added to the budget. So especially at the middle school level, if an effort can be made to hire teachers who give us more flexibility so we can have classes that are close to the target per our policy, that would be greatly helpful. I feel badly that we have classes that are well below that, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I know that there are constraints on the hiring end too, in terms of the applicants who show up and the kinds of certifications that different people hold and the quality of the staff that we want to have. And if there's any wiggle room and we have a choice between 2 people who are quite similar, one with 7-12 and one K through 8 for a middle school, K through 8 would give us a lot more flexibility so we can be responsible with how we spend our money. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree that, all else being equal, the flexibility is important. I think it just gets a little trickier as at the middle school grade, they start specializing in a specific subject, and they're preparing them to move on to high school with that same sort of specialization with the teachers. If you're teaching every subject, you're a generalist and you can only go so deep. Whereas if you're expected to be a specialist in science or math at the higher levels, it gets a little tougher if you're a K-8 teacher, because I just don't think you have the ability to dive as deep in that certification. But I would agree that all else being equal, if you have 2 level candidates, the flexibility would be helpful. So, yeah.
I have a different topic. Are we still on?
No, carry on.
I'm just kind of going through doing due diligence to the list of budget cuts, and I did think of 2 questions, but I don't know if they're so small that, I don't need catering at board meetings. I really don't. But I mean, are we talking about
dinner, though?
Are we talking about $300?
Some of us are coming right from work. I need the grapes.
Are we talking? I mean, that specifically, but we've had dinners for various things, and I personally don't need that. But I mean, is that significant budgetarily? Becky, do you know? Don't mean to
I
put you on
don't.
the
I'm
spot.
looking at Erin because she bills us. If we give her a minute, I think she'll be able to find that, and if she can't, probably Michelle can.
Can I ask a second question?
Sure.
Because I'm just kind of filtering through the list in my mind. The assistant athletic directors at the middle schools,
Those are stipends.
those are,
Yes.
yeah, because
They're not-
I was trying to remember. We didn't hire full-time people for that. That's,
I actually don't think it, is there
Craig.
one at Freeport Middle School? I thought
Yes, there-
Craig did Freeport Middle Schools. No?
No, they're both stipend positions, and I think it's, Craig, you can come up and, I think Jody Rose is at the middle school, and it's Rose at Durham Community School.
Yep, they're both stipend positions. They get paid about what a middle school coach gets paid per season, but they get it for the year. So it's like three stipends that they receive because they're doing, they're
Right,
they're
they
covering
manage the whole
games.
year, right.
Yeah.
and they're managing what do they do that you don't do? Why
So-
did we need those stipends?
So they're covering all the home games. They're handing out uniforms, collecting uniforms. They're checking paperwork, whether they have physicals, permission forms. It's basically game coverage. They have coaches meetings with the coaches prior to each season. They're supervised. They're in charge of all of the equipment that gets handed out and turned in. They meet with the officials at every game to get their information so that we can pay them and they sign the vouchers.
That sounds like a lot.
And there's a lot of other things that they do too, but those are the first things that came. They have a job description.
Thank you.
I would hope so if they get a stipend, right? Our stipend committee's not doing its job if they didn't.
Last year, the total for board meeting caterings was $674. But we've cut it down to 24 people this year, too. We were preparing for 30 last year.
Right, some of that is, I think, around and
Dine and
also the
discuss.
dine and discusses
includes-
that are
Dine
coming
and
up.
discuss is
I mean,
not
for-
included in there.
that's not-
Oh, it's
okay.
not, okay.
That's
No.
I know that based upon how many people came last year to those, I know that we reduced what we're requesting Aaron to prepare for.
Yeah, so I think those will be about $150 a piece for 24 people. That's what we're charging.
3, 1 in each town. Yeah.
I don't think we need to dine and discuss.
Do you want to
I mean,
just
I
like
wanna
have
dine-
water or nothing, or I mean, I'm fine with it, you know.
So this is just, I think they're saying specifically the dinner for those dine and
Yes.
discuss, the sandwiches. I mean,
Just do what we do for a
a
normal
regular
board meeting. Yep.
Yep.
No.
yeah, maybe we'll
yeah.
just discuss.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it really draws in more people. I appreciate it because then I don't have to race
Kate
from.
loves it. I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm not sure that $450
gonna
from the
impact the
$30 million budget is something we need to line item, but it's certainly something we can look at eliminating for next year when we're talking about our budget timeline and.
well, we
any
can
events.
eliminate it for next year, but I would not recommend with that amount redoing the article.
Messing the article
And
numbers.
then we'll
Yep.
just have it in our savings at the end of the year. That will.
You haven't gotten an email from Michelle yet about that?
I don't think I have. No, she was talking, I think she just. The AD stipend is $7,000 per person per year.
And how many people is there?
There's 2.
14,000.
Any other, thank you, Erin. Any other items to discuss? Additions, subtractions? We're ready to vote on the budget? Okay, so the motion on the floor is unamended. It is the revised item 12A that's in your budgets. We have a motion and a second. So all of those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Thanks.
And I just want to thank Becky and the whole administrative team for, really putting in a lot of work between, I imagine you guys started these conversations back in October and November. I remember some of these budget conversations being very different 5 or 6 years ago, and I think the reason we've been able to make this so much more streamlined and simple is because of the work you guys have put in. So I appreciate that. Kate?
I would just second that. Maybe it's just being on the board a couple more years, but I certainly find it easier to support the budget than I did in previous years. I feel like you present it very clear, you have a clear direction, and can support why we need to add where we need to add or cut where we need to cut. So,
Candy?
I would second all of that, really appreciate all that's been done. And I just want to get up again on that little soapbox I said last week, that we've come down every year for the last few years, and for next year's budget, we really need to pay attention to that for the towns and not increase the budget. That's it.
So thank you for all that, and that, it's possible to present that kind of budget when we have a great administrative team that's really pulling together, and so it really is a team effort. And I can't thank the administrative team enough here in RSU 5 that they're able to look at the needs systemically and district-wide and not just be advocating for their individual areas. So I really appreciate that. And saying that, I would say that the administrators may leave with the exception of the principals and Craig. But the rest of the directors, if they would like to leave, they can do that.
Jim and Aaron.
Jim and Aaron. And,
Cynthia's getting up, but she's not leaving.
No, Bonnie. It's fine if Bonnie wants to leave too.
Okay, so now we are going to circle back to 11, which is policy review. Fun times.
Okay, so that's the pink sheets in your folders. We have 3 policies to review with you this evening. And do you want to start with the hard one first or go backwards? Or no, they're all going to be good. Okay. Let's just go in order. Is that what the committee would like? Okay. All right. So you have, what we did was I think maybe 3 meetings or so, maybe 4. So with a lot of work has been put into the fundraising, student fundraising activities policy revision. As Kate alluded to a few when we talked about the reports. So what we ended up doing is striking out the whole existing policy because there were so many changes, and so that's why the whole beginning is struck out. So you'll look at the second part where it's all underlined. And so that's our proposed revised policy that and we feel like it's really thorough and met the needs of some of the community members who were looking to have, some more information and communication about the fundraising. You'll see that outlined in section number 7, section A.
We consolidated a lot of the language in sections B and C by saying a lot of everything applies in A, and so the B and the C are additional pieces for different groups, for charitable groups and for student participation in parent fundraising groups. So that's kind of how the big picture of it looks. We do have one small change that we want to make even tonight on section C. And it's really minor. So if you want to follow along with me, I can tell you what we want to cross out and add. So that first paragraph, it's page 3 of 3. Is everybody with me? Okay. So where it says guidelines for, the heading is guidelines for student participation in parent group fundraising activities. The first sentence remains, the board recognizes that PTCs and other parent groups, e.g. the boosters, may wish to involve students in their fundraising activities. Crossing off the following general guidelines apply to, if you just cross off those words. So it would start with student participation in fundraising activities to benefit parent groups, where the funds raised by the activity will be deposited into the parent group accounts. Now it continues, the sentence continues, and it really is incorporating the number 1. It continues, shall be in accordance with section A and this section.
So when you say section A, you mean the big section A earlier?
The section A, yes, the very front page, that whole section. And then number 1 would be entirely crossed out because that has included that piece into the first paragraph. And then there's just a slight change to number 2, which becomes number 1. It would just start notwithstanding section A3. And then continue on. I did get a request by email from Valley. She asked if it would be possible to compile a list of the fundraisers that involve the use of school day, and she specified class time, advisory, or lunchtime. Student participation rates for each of these and the dollar amount raised by each. So I put together a chart, and each of the administrators took time to complete that. I have it in big font because that's the way I like it, so I can see it better. So on the left column has the name of the actual fundraiser. And then that second column in is whether it's class time, advisory time, lunchtime, or other, and they specified. Then it's the school, the amount raised, student participation rate, and their estimate of the total amount of time used during school time. So if you look at the first page, the entire first page, with the exception of the last one, those are all class time. But if you look specifically at what they are, like a readathon, they would probably do during a reading time and literacy. So it's during class time, but it's instructive as well. Same, the jogathon during the PE time, so it makes sense. And then there's one on the next page that fits that category. Halfway down, jump rope for heart. That's done. Let's see, has some recess time in there, and it's grades 3 through 5, so class and recess time. So I'm not sure if it's PE time. That's Durham. Okay, so it does involve some class time and some recess time. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to look this over, and if you have any questions for me or any of the other of the building administrators, we can answer those.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to add a little bit more information regarding the policy itself and what we were trying to accomplish with it that I don't think was very clear when, with the old, or the existing policy. There's basically a tier of allowance for use of instructional time. So if it's a student organization, that's section A, where we've got in A3 that it shall have minimal impact on instructional time and not be unduly demanding of student or staff time or work. B is fundraising for humanitarian or charitable purposes. We're basically allowing that in this policy as written to follow the same guidelines as a student organization. The real difference would be use of student participation in parent group fundraising, where we're saying you may not use instructional time. That's really the main difference between the sections. And we tried to make it clear as to like where the money goes to. That's why you'll see wording about where the money gets deposited. And this was all just due to, seems like hours of conversations and emails.
And donuts.
But that's really, I think, the main purpose of the three sections, and it just was not as clear, and the reason for rewriting it is because the way it was written before, it just had a lot of repetition, and you couldn't really figure out, like, what's the difference between these? It was hard to follow, so we just tried to streamline it a little bit. And then, of course, I think Cynthia mentioned it, but the big piece, new piece, would be the A7, which is the communication portion of letting parents know, what is the fundraiser, what's the organization behind it, how much do they keep, how much do our students get to keep, letting people know it's optional, that if they would like, they could send in a donation in lieu of participation, because we heard from some feedback that there's some parents who would just prefer to do that than do the fundraising portion. So,
were we not accepting donations prior to this policy?
Well, we always
Can't
accept
imagine.
donations.
They would say, no, keep that check.
That's, yeah.
So I have a question, Kate. So that wasn't part of the original policy. There wasn't like a communication.
Correct.
So that seems great.
Correct.
Like
Correct.
to send something out that's like streamlined for. So that's for every school, every activity. There's a something that goes home, the kind of same format.
Yeah, and it might. I mean, it could be something that's at the beginning of the year.
Right.
Okay, like a one-time.
It could be like if it's something pretty routine that the school does. I don't know, like say Scholastic book fairs every year or whatever.
Right.
But as things pop up, you could do a communication then too.
I think it's great because I'm with Michelle. I mean, I'm sure they would have taken your donation before, but to have it in writing and to be like, you know what, I can send this check in and just kind of forget about it, which, is an option for some people. It's a good idea.
So I'm just trying to understand the difference between A, B, and C. So like B would be the Jump Rope for Heart, right? Like that's a charitable foundation, right? So something like the
high school has the walk
Charity
for
walk.
charity
Right.
every year.
Right, so those ones
Yeah.
I get.
Okay.
And C I think I get, right? That's the PTA, and that's actually Scholastic, right? The Scholastic book fair is usually run by the PTAs, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's different school to school, but I know at Pownell it is.
It always seems like the PTA people run in the
Yeah.
register.
I mean, and it is probably a lot different at the elementary level for some of those fundraisers. It
Right.
probably is heavy with the PTC.
PTCs,
Yeah.
right. So
But there's
then
probably
what's
not a
the-
lot
what
of children
falls in A?
involvement either. What's A?
Like what would be A? Would that be like at the high school they're selling grapefruits?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know if they sell grapefruits, but
It would,
Do they?
in fact,
they do?
I think
Clubs and student
organizations. The other thing.
Boosters?
No, boosters, it would be the parent organization, C.
Oh, okay.
So you can't take up class time to do that.
For booster, okay, that makes sense.
I think, one of the less clear-cut examples, which was heavy topic of this, for this particular policy, was the magazine drive at Freeport Middle School, which is a student organization. It would qualify under that because that's where the money goes. And that's why there's the piece in there about where the money gets deposited. It does not go to the PTC, it goes into the student account.
Right, because the PTC has then control over what that funds, whereas
Right.
this goes directly into the school.
And it's, I think, more clear-cut now, too, because all the PTCs are their own 501Cs now. They have their own separate accounts. They're not part of the RSU 5 accounts, so I think that'll be easy enough to track.
Lindsay?
I don't see that, the magazine thing on this list.
Great American.
That's what that is?
Yeah, I think it's Magazine Drive and Cookie Dough or another thing, so it might not say Magazine Drive.
So what's the overall, I don't think we should be selling sugary products. So what's the filter, according to this policy, who says what programs, fundraisers are okay? The principals?
The principal and the superintendent as well.
Don't they violate our wellness policies, though?
Did you see the cookies up there? That's true, you did want to get rid of
I did want to get rid of, yeah. I don't eat the cookies. No,
That's why
but
you
I mean, all right, so according to this policy as written, the principals have discretion. We do have a wellness policy that's written out, and it's very explicit about sugary foods. They shouldn't be served in the classroom. Can't remember exactly the language of that, but it seems to me that that particular fundraiser does violate our wellness policy.
Are you going to tell high schoolers to stop selling pies?
I'm against all sugar. I don't think we should be peddling sugar to people. I think it's antithetical to our wellness policy. So yeah, I'm sorry. I feel that we're being attacked by sugar in our grocery stores, and we don't need more sugar in the schools. We're trying to teach kids how to eat healthy.
I think the first thing to get rid of is chocolate milk then. That's like the biggest sugar. I mean, you look at the sugar in the chocolate milk, that would get rid of most of the sugar in the schools. I mean,
So back to the policy, though. I mean, I don't want to go on a sugar rant, which I just did, but it'll just be a little one, and then I'll just cut it off. According to this policy, I mean, could we have language in this policy that all, and maybe it already exists there. I did read it, but it's kind of a lot, so maybe the people who wrote it can chime in. Is there language in here about, all fundraisers need to be consistent with all board policies? I mean, it's sort of obvious, but yet it goes on.
The closest we would get is that there's a request form that needs to be approved by both the building principal and the superintendent, who are in charge of implementing our policies.
Make them the anti-sugar people.
Patty?
I feel like the biggest thing this tackles is instructional time, and I think that's that's why we have the 3 tiers. Given that our parent-led groups and booster groups are their own entities now with their own accounting, I mean, I think we couldn't encourage them to keep our wellness policies and things in place, but in mind. But I'm not sure that we. I don't know. I'm afraid to say this. I'm not sure we have jurisdiction over them, nor should we. Although I'm totally with you on the sugar thing. I just think that's another.
Well, that particular one wasn't a parent group. It was a
May I speak?
student fund or whatever.
So in our policy, JL, the wellness policy, we just had revised it last year. So if you, right near the end of that policy, it says school organizations will be encouraged to engage in fundraising projects that are supportive of healthy eating and student wellness. So it's somewhat addressed in our wellness policy.
So may I
that
suggest?
issue.
May I suggest that we at least include it in the cross-reference? Because it,
JL.
yeah.
Yep.
And
yeah.
can I keep going about something different? And I agree with Lindsay, the less sugar, the better. I wanted to bring up an idea that was discussed at the policy committee, and this is the use of not just sales reps who come and do pitches to our students during the school day, but in addition to that, that they engage in giving out individual prizes to students who fundraise the most. And that can happen in many different ways. It could be either giving them a bracelet because they fundraise the most, or they take them out to lunch if they were the winners, or they have games where students grab money from a pot during lunch or advisory, I'm not sure which. But that was one of the things that I wanted to discuss today. It's not in the policy right now, but I wanted to see how the board feels about trying to eliminate those kinds of individual prizes that add a level of competition to the activity that I think strays from our educational mission of trying to make sure that everyone feels included and that kids are not competing for the wrong purposes. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that I shared all that feedback that I got with the board from parents, and I feel like it's at least my duty to bring it up because a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with those kinds of practices in our schools.
Okay.
Yep, the policy committee was also aware of Valley's concern, and she also did share with us prior to the email that she shared with the board. The policy committee had seen that, where she shared the feedback she had received from various, I think, parents or community members. We did consider that and stopped short of adding it into the policy because we felt we should bring that to the board. I think I don't know if we were split on it. I mean, we could understand both ways. Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm understanding what you guys are talking about correctly, I would support like no awards because it highlights wealth disparity, doesn't it? I mean, if you're awarding, am I understanding this correctly? So the situation is, say
Not
there's
if you
a contest.
donate it, right?
No, but if you're, yeah, maybe I could get a little bit more explicit explanation of the situation we're talking
Yeah,
about.
so when you participate in some fundraisers, you participate in them, and usually they're the ones who have organizations from outside of the school who come and actually do all the logistics behind the scenes. And sometimes they have reps who they do the pitch and they explain what the products are that the kids are supposed to sell. And then they say, and for the ones who raise the most, and I don't know if they say the number of kids or the percentage of kids, there are different awards, individual awards. So if you're in the top 3 of having raised the most, then you get to go to have lunch at Pat's Pizza or somewhere in town or nearby for lunch. Or you are eligible to participate in this game where you just grab money out of a box and you keep it, or you receive I don't know, some technology device of some sort, or things, prizes, individual prizes that are given out to individual students who are the most successful at fundraising.
Jen.
So I'm going to kind of go back to what you said about the buses, Lindsay, which is I feel like this is like we're just getting all this information thrown at us. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know what really you're talking about, which it's hard because, you know, you did share those emails that had all the parent feedback. My issue is like feedback is coming, where's it coming from? Are these conversations, are we like questioning people about how they feel? Because a lot of those responses to me felt like something was put to them as a question and then they responded to it. And also with all of that material coming back as emails, like, I just find it odd that I've never received one email about fundraising, if anyone else has and wants to share, but then you have 17. Like, I just find that odd. And I feel like it's kind of a created thing, and now you're saying, like, oh, and, you know, there's prizes and money, and you go to Pat's Pizza, and I have no idea what is this true? Is it not? Where is this coming from? So I feel uncomfortable with changing a policy based on one person's feedback from community members where nobody else has received feedback, and one board member's sharing of all of these prizes that I don't know if anyone else has heard about this too. That's my issue.
Okay.
I think, from my perspective, in helping draft the policy was, and I'm not speaking at this point for the policy committee, because I know we have different views on this point. I feel that the communication piece to parents takes care of that, because you have the ability to opt out of it. And if you don't want your child participating in that, we are now putting in the policy that this must be communicated up front and the option provided. And I feel that parents can make that decision. As long as they're informed, I trust parents to make the right decision for their children. So I'm comfortable not adding something like that to the policy.
Yeah. Maddie?
I agree with that. I mean, the reason why I'm personally split, Lindsay's point about, you know, the possibility of wealth disparity being highlighted by the opportunity that one child might have to engage in selling behavior that other kids might not have the same opportunity, could be, that's troubling. And I'd like to see us, take steps to make sure that that kind of thing isn't happening. I've got to think there's got to be a way we can incentivize kids differently. But I'm for fundraising because I think it's wise of us to minimize impact to instructional time. But I also think that this is a healthy way that people are engaged in their community. And I also think that it's a healthy way to figure out how to be involved in the economy. I think it is a part of a child's education. And agreed that if a parent thinks that that's not appropriate for their child or it's counter to their values and they have the opportunity to opt out, then I think we've given them that opportunity and that choice.
Yeah, I just want to clarify the emails and where they came from. They come mostly from Freeport Middle School parents, and I happen to have had children, one now in high school and now one in the middle school. So it makes sense for those parents to reach out to me because I happen to be their rep, so to speak, and they see me and they know me. So that's where they're coming from mostly. And some of the practices that I'm referencing are specifically to fundraisers at the middle school. So it's a group of parents who come mostly from that one school for that particular fundraiser.
Okay.
Valerie, do you feel comfortable sharing, was it unsolicited feedback, or was this something that you've asked in passing, or is it?
It was unsolicited for a while, and then when I started getting more emails about the same issue, recurrent issue, then I asked questions, like which specifically are the things that really you're against, or which are the things you're specifically for. So, for example, when they were asking me about why do we need to do this, then I would ask back, well, would you be in favor of writing a check? Or would you be in favor of having full disclosure? So there was a little bit of both. I didn't initiate, but I followed up.
So I would encourage folks that are uncomfortable with those sort of things to be talking to the principals, right? So when we're saying that our administrators are sort of the person who's making the decision, yay or nay, on a specific fundraiser, and we're seeing consistent issues with a specific one, folks should, be willing to or comfortable going and explaining that to the people who are making the decision. We're always telling folks that, go start with the person who can make the most change to what you're have an issue with. So, I imagine if Ray was hearing consistently that there was a certain fundraiser that most people were uncomfortable with, he might reconsider that fundraiser in the future, or maybe be able to do it in a different way. I worry, sort of the triangulation of the last 2 weeks of, we're talking about a policy to limit parent contribution to events, and then we talk about our strategic plan where we want to increase experiential learning, and then we want to put in place a potential limitation on fundraising. Something's going to have to give, and my fear is it's going to be, we're going to have fewer experiential learning opportunities because that's the easiest thing to move when we have these other policies. So, I would encourage parents, if they're uncomfortable, don't participate, because it's always been voluntary. I mean, we can tell them it's voluntary in a letter, but it's always been voluntary because I have never participated in any. Not because I'm philosophically opposed, but I'm just lazy. Too many other things to do. I'm busy, because a lot of that stuff does fall to parents, right, and their comfort level. And so, I would encourage, I like the changes to the policy. I like the idea of the transparency specific to the fundraisers. Like, okay, who's doing this? What are they getting out of it, right? If you're selling a $20 something and they're getting $1.50, I'd probably rather write a check. So I like the changes you guys have made, but I don't want to hamstring the ability of all of these groups to be able to raise money, because I think Maddie's point's a good one. I think it does get people engaged in the economics. I think, prizes help kids get motivation. I mean, we can tell them it's the right thing to do and for the good of your school, but when they win a little Huzima watch it and they can wear their bracelet, I mean, it does incent them to do more, and our goal is to raise as much funds as possible. I mean, not at the expense of being good humans, but a little competition isn't bad either. So I appreciate all the work you guys have put into this policy. Okay.
I would just add, too, for this particular one that we're talking about with the magazine drive, we did ask some questions in the policy committee of Ray, and I know he can probably come up and speak to this as well, but we asked, has he heard any feedback on that particular one? We asked, when have you considered other alternatives? He can answer all of these too, but I know he's here. I don't want to speak for him. So I guess, since you're here, Ray.
You did a very good job stating that.
Some of the things that we asked you that I was just saying were have you considered alternatives? Have you received any complaints? What's the feedback you received? And then the third one that I wanted to cover was the idea of that the PTC, their involvement in picking that as a fundraiser each year, which are parents.
So I'll try to hit them all, and the ones I missed, let me know. We have talked about in the past with the PTC group about, do we want to replace it? Can we replace it? And we've tried several other alternatives. But when we've tried them, the amount of money we brought in for the amount of time and personnel that it took was not even close to being able to cover that. So, there have been at least 4 or 5 other attempts to do that. Just knowing that, granted, it gets talked about as the magazine drive. It's a lot more than magazines, but knowing that print media and what's happening with it, in our country, that it's a declining, fundraiser, knowing that at some point in time it's not going to be worth our time if it kind of keeps trending the way it is. We have tried that. We've talked about it at PTC meetings every year to talk about whether we want to continue and do that. And really it comes down to when we look at the amount of money we raise for really a half hour of student time, and then some parent volunteers for another 6 or 8 hours to kind of coordinate all the collection with that. it's a lot of bang for the buck, for what we're putting into it in return with that. Some of the conversations I've had with parents, which have been very minimal, when I talked about the amount of time and the amount of money, and that the alternative would be, upping the Kiev cost to $200. That's like, that's kind of a little eye-opening with that. I'd get more parent phone calls around, way more parent phone calls around charging $150 to Kiev than I do on the magazine drive with that. Which ones did I miss, Kate? Any other questions?
I just wanted to back on to what Valley responded, is that, and this kind of gives me the thought of if everything is, what's coming to you from the board, from parents is middle school, and it's a middle school issue. I mean, I feel like that's 17 people that possibly should have been directed to Ray. I feel like sometimes when board stuff comes, when certain things come to the board, it does a disservice when they come to the board, because they should have been placed somewhere prior. That's just my opinion.
And that's a good point. Well taken.
Okay, are we comfortable with fundraising and moving on to next?
Okay, the next one is Student Activities Fund. And
From all the money from the fundraisers?
Yes.
We move on to
They kind of go hand in hand. So you'll see there's 3 edits, revisions. We've added the first line, student activities as related to this policy do not include boosters or school parent-run organizations, just to be really specific about what it doesn't include. We also address the issue of the gate receipts from the track and field, Joan Benoit Samuelson Track and Field, being deposited into a separate account for the maintenance. And the third one is just, we went around a little bit with this one, but we landed on any unexpended remaining class funds shall not be transferred from one school to another. Ray had pointed out that there's oftentimes not a lot left anyway from those funds, but they were never intended and never have been sent over to the high school.
So what happens to them?
So Ray.
Or Will.
Or Will.
See, I just did what you guys do to kids. Like, oh no, they said my name, but I don't know what the question was.
So the money that's really in the class accounts is all spent in the fall of their 6th grade year to go to Kiev. So what they're doing as 7th and 8th graders is paying back that money that has already been spent on them, because otherwise we could not afford to send them, because we've only had the kids for a month and no chance to fundraise with them at that point in time, and don't even always have the magazine money in for that first time. So it's really, there is no money left over, because it goes back into the Kiev account for the next class. They're paying back what was left over to what was given to them to start out with.
Talk about an economics lesson.
Yeah.
Is the same true for you, Will? I'm guessing it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So just so you know, after the discussion about the food, there was a run on cookies.
Get them before they're gone.
That thing has been stripped bare. Yeah. Yeah. It's been amazing to just sort of see people like, all that talk about sugar and cream, like, maybe I'll get one. It's like the end of an era back there.
Fear not, people. We squashed Lindsay's healthy.
We talked about sugar. We talked about getting rid of the cookies.
That's it. I think it should have been a fundraiser. So having said that, I was paying more attention to the cookies than I was to the question, to be honest with you. So if it was about fundraising relative to the trips?
No,
Okay.
It was about what happens for, one of the additions to the policy is any unexpended remaining class funds shall not be transferred to the next school.
Oh.
So what happens to them? Right. So what happens to the funds if there's still money in the 8th grade account?
There isn't, but
All right.
so we never have to worry about it. We usually have to supplement it with a bit of this and that to get there. And earlier on, our bigger fundraiser is 5th grade, and that not dissimilar, but they earn a head there. So the 5th grade, they fundraise as 5th grade that supports their Boston piece in 5th grade and camp in the beginning of 6th grade, and then 8th grade basically it's an effort just to get to that point. So there isn't any real carryover for them, but
okay.
Oh, that's all right. Will?
No, I don't have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
But maybe Cynthia.
I didn't know if you had more that you were going to add about the policy.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to, that particular line, the reason we couldn't really figure out, like, why it says grade 8 class account shall remain. We just thought it should apply to all schools, so we're not moving
Right.
money from one school to the next.
Down
And
off
then
to the next one.
I think the other part that we went round and round on here was the last paragraph. We ended up not changing anything with that, which was what happens with the senior class.
Right, because there is money left in those accounts, right? I mean, we had some discussion at the finance committee about this one, which I think is why you guys looked at it.
Right.
So so right now it says that it stays, right? And that they can use it for reunions and, yeah.
I was actually confused when I read that. Now that I'm thinking back, my first read through that.
The last paragraph.
Unexpended remaining funds at the end of the calendar year, 5 years after the class has graduated. So
they can't use it for a reunion.
can they use it for another class within that 5-year period, or does the money literally sit there for 5 years and then get put into a scholarship?
They can use it if they want to.
But they're
right?
graduated.
Yeah, they can transfer it to a scholarship fund but it has to be, they can't put it into their own account and
Right,
say,
that's
hey,
the
we're going
big
in 10
issue.
years, we're going to do a reunion. They cannot do that.
But it sounds like
They raise the
can
money,
do-
why not?
No, but it sounds like, I mean, I guess you're just saying the 5 years because it might take someone 5 years to get that done.
To pick something to spend it on. Yeah.
So I think an example, I think one class bought a bench or made,
Class gift.
or right?
Yeah.
Maddie, I'm looking, right? So they might use it for something like that, but we don't want at the end of 5 years for the money to be transferred out into a separate account.
Okay, just
Oh,
5 years seems like a really long time to me, but I mean, I guess it's fine.
Well, I guess
it
it's
doesn't
like,
matter. It doesn't
say
matter.
they go on to some sort of, college or other.
Graduate.
What's that?
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Or trade school or something else. I guess it just seems reasonable that after 5 years, they may be ready to think about that.
Like they're thinking about high school 5 years.
Remember all that money we left
Well,
in the
I
account?
would, if I was like the class president, I would remember,
Right.
hey, we got money, they gotta figure out.
Just sharing anecdotally those benches, tracking those people down and reminding them that they have money and encouraging them to make a donation. It's like, it's a lot of work. So, I mean, I think 5 years is, after 5 years, I can't,
It's
it'd be so
impossible,
much
right.
harder.
Yeah, I guess within 5 years, they maybe should still be able to find
some of
them,
them, yeah.
some of them, yeah, before they all scatter.
I mean, and I'm not sure how related these are, if these are even funds that could be used for other, but we just got the email about Project Graduation today, and I'm curious, like, how many of these classes have money left in it, and then are these the same classes that are like, oh, we don't have enough money for Project Graduation? Could they use the money that's in their account for that?
Jen, Miss
What's that?
Golko,
Oh, shit.
can you respond to that?
No, but like, Well, yes, if they wanted to, but, I mean, is it like you're either a class who's short on money and asking for money, or you're a class that ends up with money in your account and people didn't have to pay extra for project graduation? I'm wondering if these class funds could have been used for project graduation for that specific class.
That's a great question. Sometimes many times the events for project graduation are booked and paid for so far in advance, and so it might not be totally understood what is the actual balance at the end. Some kids are paying their class dues right up until the end. Some classes are having fundraisers still in the end of May or June. It really depends on the activities that each group has participated in for the senior class. It depends on how they've raised money over the course of 4 years. And so some classes choose to do a high number of fundraisers so that they are lowering the cost of what senior week looks like. Some
the money that
the leftover,
the money that they're putting in their account can be used for project graduation, correct?
Sure. Yeah, we don't use any school funds for project graduation, so that's what the money could be used if they chose to do that.
So the $50 a student per year goes into that class's account? That's
Yes.
where those funds go?
All the class dues don't come to school at all.
Okay, so those go into that account, and then any fundraisers they do, that's how those accounts get built?
Yes.
Is that the same account, like then the school pulls the money for the cap and gowns out of that account?
Yes. So correct. So I should correct myself and say that. So, but normally, so again, that depends on the class. This year's class has decided to do things very differently. In the past, the cost of the cap and gown was not included in kids' dues. The kids' dues went right to fundraising events and things like that, and they paid $17 for their cap and gown. One of the questions that came from the board, why do kids have to pay that for cap and gown, is that in some schools they borrow their cap and gown. I mean, they're literally never going to wear it again, and so unless Halloween or something, and so many schools just rent cap and gowns. We have decided that kids keep their cap and gowns. Many like to, and so that's what the cost is for that.
So this is not strictly related to the policy, but since you're talking about senior week and the fees, class fees that are collected, who is responsible for setting the level of those fees? And do you get any students who are unable to meet those targets?
I guess,
or any complaints about them being high, low, or any trouble with any kids who are not able to afford them?
So I'm caught, not that I don't want to answer your question, but I wrote back to the board this afternoon that I feel like this is a major topic, that it's a pretty complicated topic that I don't think has anything to do with the policy, because I feel like it's very different than funding a academically connected trip that kids would do. So I'm happy to answer because it varies so widely from class to class, but I feel like that's probably a whole separate conversation.
I would agree. As it relates to the fundraising, I think the question may have come more around the student accounts, right? Because it's the same account it goes into, which is so. But I appreciated your response.
And also, students in graduation technically are no longer ours. They have graduated. They are not our students. We could not hold them to school rules that night, things like that. So that impacts how we approach, plan for, pay for, everything for project graduation.
Right, like they have to have their own insurance because they're not students anymore. So
right, yeah. We have no part in the planning whatsoever.
Right. Yep.
And this was also part of our discussion as it relates to that last paragraph, because, let's say hypothetically that a class decides to put the money in another account and throw themselves a big party where there's illegal drinking, perhaps driving, something unfortunate happens. We want to make sure that that's in no way related to the student fundraising that happened while they were here.
I would just add to that, that it was, when students are fundraising as an RSU 5 student, there's a certain level of expectation on how the funds will be spent. and how they will benefit the students. And so to then hold on to the money and spend it 10 years down the road for something that is totally unrelated to why they were initially raising the funds, I think that's why we felt we didn't need to change that last paragraph.
Yep. Lindsay.
I'd just like to share that we're 30 minutes over on this topic. Thank you.
All right.
Move to the next one. Homework.
Everybody good with student activity funds? Okay.
Okay, so the last one is homework. That was really pretty straightforward. Not a lot of contention on this one. Basically, we struck out most of it, and what's left is about a paragraph. I did have. So basically, it's the RSU 5 board believes that homework should be meaningful. We moved that line up, so that's why it's underlined, but it was in there. Homework should be meaningful, engaging, process-oriented, integrative, while being mindful of the diverse capacities of students. And then you drop down to where it was D. Homework helps students apply the skills they have been taught in school. And right underneath that, that should have been struck out, that first line, because you see where grade is struck out. It really should have been that whole first line.
Wait, which one? Where are you?
So under the letter D, where it says the amount of homework assigned, that should be crossed out, that whole first sentence. That was just an error. Thank you for pointing that out, Valerie. And then, so it should start, as a child advances through school, it is reasonable that the amount of homework can be expected to increase. And then the only other line in that would be underneath that paragraph. Schools will communicate homework expectations and supports to students and parents and guardians. And so I did get an email from Mara that asked some specific questions, and so I sent the 4 questions to the building administrators, and I'm just going to summarize their responses to those questions. So the first one was, I'll read her email. She said, as we consider revisions to the homework policy, I'd appreciate the opportunity to hear from the administrators' perspectives on the following. So the first one was the overall amount of homework at each school grade. So she just wanted to have a sense of, and so I kind of summarized it. They're not exact, but at the K2 level, basically it's reading and math, and it's their home link, so about 10 to 15 minutes. That's on average. 3 to 5, again, reading, literacy work, and math, about 20 to 30 minutes. And then at the 6th to 8th grade level, I got one response, so it was 20 to 60 minutes per night. And then I'm going to read you what Jen wrote, because I think it's worth reading the whole paragraph. So at the high school, it varies greatly because of the course selection. Students in AP and advanced class level courses have expectations of extensive work time outside of the classroom. Students in online classes often need to complete assignments outside of class as well. Students in general college prep classes have a variance of homework, which could be 15 minutes to a few hours. Many students have a study hall or more than one built into the day, and all of the students have advisory 5 days a week for 40 minutes a day, where they can get support from teachers to complete their assignments if needed. So that's the general consensus of that question, or the responses. The next one is whether they believe homework limits are beneficial or not, since we are removing the specific guidelines for each level. And so the responses are, the limits have not informed our practice, as we are below the limit and haven't considered increasing the volume of homework that students are expected to complete each night. It's our intention to keep the amount of homework at a very manageable level. If a parent reports that their child is doing hours of homework, then we say, don't go that long, come talk to us. There's also a similar response in one of your other questions. The next one was what they perceive the benefits of homework would be, especially in the younger grades. All of them had responded in some way that it really supports the development of the habits of work. Strong evidence to support the value in daily reading. And then the last one, basically, the answer is yes to this. Whether teachers modify homework on a student-by-student basis, for example, if a student has executive functioning challenges. So yes, they all do. In fact, even if a student typically, would complete an assignment always, and if they're having trouble with math and they've already spent more than so much time on it, oftentimes the teacher will say, if you're spending more than 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it is, draw a line where you were. If your child was frustrated, let us know, because then it means, they need to have some more instruction around that. So, not just with IEPs, with every child, there's, that consideration of what their needs are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry. I lost my voice this week. Luckily, I got it back for tonight. Thank you. I really appreciate that information. That's helpful, and I don't have any concerns about then removing those parts of the policy. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I would add that I think this is the one we considered as a committee to actually get rid of altogether. And then decided, well, we could do something more general with our kind of overall philosophy of homework.
Thanks, Kate.
I think that was probably a good call, because I think, it's one of those things that people wonder about, and it might be an actual policy somebody might look up. So it's good that it doesn't look like we just forgot it, but we have one, and, and we very specifically don't have 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes.
And I'll just share anecdotally that when I lived in Texas and my kids were at private school, I was the mom that brought the film The Race to Nowhere to our school for all of our teachers to watch. And so I very much think we have a problem in our country of too much pressure and too much homework. But I've felt, in the 7 years since we've come to this district, I've heard every teacher every fall, say what Cynthia just paraphrased, which is, if your kid's spending a lot of time, have them come talk to us. And I feel like it's wise of us to have a statement, make our philosophical statement, but I do trust that our teachers and administrators are doing a good job.
Okay. Yes.
So we took out all numbers. I mean, I think that if you're going to have a policy, I don't know that you need to say. I think like a minimum and a maximum range. It seems kind of pointless. I don't know, without something specific in here. I don't think any of us want students to have 4 hours of homework. Couldn't there be like a maximum and like a student's on? Why not put, Cynthia, like what Cynthia just said, you could add flexibility language in there, like, the amount of homework is up to the teachers. If you have a problem, see your teacher and your principal. In general, our district believes in, a reasonable amount of homework, depending on grade level, and you could like list that out or something.
I think they do. It says they will communicate the expectations and supports, so they're going to tell, the teachers are expected to tell the parents, hey, in my class, you can expect this. And I think teachers do that.
So why did you guys decide to keep the policy?
Isn't it in the I think it's in the school.
Each school's handbook.
I believe that it is.
I don't recall reading it anywhere. I
None of the principals are nodding yes or no.
I recall being told by teachers and principals like what was the expectation of the school. But I guess, why did you guys feel like keeping the policy? It's not required. It's not a state law. Most of our policies are required by state.
Yeah, and this one is not.
I don't know. It just seems kind of like there's not a lot in it.
I just think keep the policy because I think, Michelle, you're the one that said it. Like, someone's going to look it up. And if there isn't one there, then all of a sudden it creates a situation of like, what, a parent
What's your
coming
policy?
in, what's your policy? I also think with the numbers, like, you know, from a perspective of being a former teacher and being a parent, I think it's almost impossible to put numbers on something. I mean, I think that even teachers who are the absolute best teachers in the world will say this should take someone approximately 20 minutes. But the reality of that is that there is going to be a kid that it takes an hour, and there is going to be a kid that can do it in 2 minutes. I have heard throughout my kid's entire, you know, career in Freeport what Cynthia said, where every teacher says, if your kid is at this point and a tear drops and you've been doing, like, stop, literally right on the, I mean, I remember Lynn Parada, like, stop, this is where we, you know, decided to end it. And it has always been totally acceptable, and it's a great way to have a good open relationship with the teacher. You know, I've never felt like it's been a roadblock if homework's been an issue, so. I mean, but I think you need to keep the policy just for the one parent that might say Freeport doesn't have a policy.
Yep.
All right, it's 4 sentences.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have
We have
shorter
other policies like that.
It just makes me uncomfortable. It's so short.
So I'm trying to remember, though, I think this is a new sentence that we added, was the communication piece. Is that a new sentence?
It looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not in there. So that is I think, to me, the purpose of the policy.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Wow.
All right, so that's all of the policies we're discussing tonight for first read. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the following policy first read: JJE, student fundraising activities; DFF, student activities funds; and IKB, homework. Erica, Lindsay, all those in favor? None opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so last agenda item before public comment is consideration and approval, motion for consideration and approval of revisions for the RSU 5 guidelines for the use of the Joan Benoit Samuelson track and field.
And if the principals would like to leave at this time, that's fine too. And so then we're just down to Craig, who's sticking it out and is going to talk to the revisions that we're recommending the board to approve.
Okay, so let's get, so hold on.
Yes, oh yes, we have a new, you want the, I think the
It's white with yellow. So I would take a motion, just so we get that part out of the way. John? Second? Mara? Thank you. All right.
So is your copy, the white copy with the yellow highlights, does it only have yellow highlights? Does it have any bluish ones? No? Okay. So I'm going to take this in 2 parts. The first part is going to be the revisions because of the speakers, the PA system, and the starting time of games. The others are some typos and language stuff. So we've, as you heard earlier, we met, we had 3 people, 3 different companies come, walk our facility. We didn't really give them any parameters except people need to hear here, here, and here. For track meets, they have to hear at the high jump, excuse me, the long jump pits on the other side of the track. And for track meets, our throwing is in right field of baseball. So we need to have some sort of sound reach that far 3 to 4 times a year. And of course, the bleachers and the players on the field. So they came with 3 different proposals. They all came with their proposals, and every one of the proposals had the speakers mounted either on the light poles on the bleacher side or on the press box pointing towards the field. And the language in the current guidelines say that the speakers have to be pointed away from the neighbors and towards the school. And so we went back to one of the vendors, the vendor that we thought was the best price and the best product, and asked them, can you rework this with the speakers pointing towards the school? And so that meant putting them on the other light poles on the other side of the field, shooting across the field towards the school. And I'm not going to do a good job of this, but the noise science guy said that even though the speakers would be pointing towards the school and towards the bleachers, having them that close to the neighbors would be actually more loud, and the decibels would be higher than if they were on the other side pointing to them. So we met, we had a neighborhood meeting, very lightly attended. Our liaison from the neighborhood, who was on the track and field committee, the school's track and field committee, sent out an email to his group. I went around with the flyers and hit the same neighbors that I did when we had our portable lights 2 or 3 years ago, and explained that to them. Is there anything I missed about the speakers?
No, I think our next step is to have the board approve these revisions, and then we will be meeting with the town
Right.
in the near future.
Right. The other thing that we presented to the neighbors in that meeting was a proposal to move soccer start times to 7 when we have a triple header. So many schools schedule first team, JV, and varsity in one day. It cuts down on the number of buses, the number of officials. You save money because you don't have to pay travel on both days. Because right now, when we start a varsity game at 6, we don't have enough time to play 2 additional games in front of that. So what I have to do is now take either a single first team game or boys and girls first team, schedule on another day during the week, which impacts 4 varsity teams' practices, or schedule them on a Saturday. So what this does is it cuts down on travel. You're only going to travel one day now instead of putting the first teams on another day, and it cuts down on travel on Saturday because a lot of those first team games I put on Saturday because there just wasn't any place else to put them. So because of that, if you go to page 6 and look at 6A2, you'll see an underlined sentence there. With the exception of triple header soccer, games will start no later than 6. And please take note of the 6 o'clock and the 8 o'clock that appears in the next sentence, and then the last sentence, lights are turned off with 20 minutes, because I'll get back to that in another round. Number 4 is a completely new number. We inserted it there, and that talks about when we play triple headers. The varsity game will start at 7. Reasonable temp to have it over by 9, and the lights out 20 minutes later. So both 2 and 4, there's 2 hours between start and finish, and 20 minutes when the lights are turned out. And again, I'll get back to that. Which moved 5, 6, and 7 just got moved down. 5, 6, and 7 were 4, 5, and 6. If you now go to page 7, the top number B, the speakers, the third sentence, the speakers shall be aimed away from the adjoining neighborhood. We're just going to strike that out because they are going to be pointed towards the neighborhood.
And the folks you talked with the neighbors, they were understanding of this?
Yeah,
okay.
So I think when we put that in there, intuitively to me, it makes sense to point them away. But when the noise science guy, he brought in his color schemes and where the decibel levels were, it was clear that if you even though they're pointed away, and there's no other place to put the speakers so that it's aimed there, the science of the noise and the decibel levels made sense to them.
One of the points they made was that the speakers will, even though it'll be pointed towards the neighborhood, they're going to be pointed down, and that the turf field will absorb some of the noise.
Yep. The other change is on page 8 in the second column. 7 to 9:30 for triple header soccer games. So 9:30 needs to be changed to 9:20. So the second column, second row, the underline where it says 7 to 9:30 p.m. triple header soccer games. 9:30 should be changed to 9:20 to reflect what we just read in the two things that mentioned beforehand. In column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In column 3, I'm sorry, second row, we struck out 1 to 3:30 p.m. because if you look above, that's already covered in the 9 a.m. to 6:30. I don't know what we were thinking. I mean, it's already covered. So, in the fifth column, second row, again underlined, sunset to 9:30. That needs to change to 9:20. And then on page 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth column, second row, 3:30 to 9:30 p.m. with a little number 5. Weekdays, triple header soccer only. 9:30 should be changed to 9:20. And this was just a typo. It doesn't have to do with the lights or anything, but field hockey in that same block down below, it says 4:30 to 7:30 weekdays. A small number 2 in parentheses, that's been struck out, and we put a 1 in there. That should have been a 1 all along. No one caught that, because if you read what 2 is lights not anticipated, because sunset isn't until 7 in April. Field hockey is played in the fall. So that we just inadvertently put a 2. That should have been a 1 all along. And those are the changes due to the PA system and soccer going from 6 o'clock starts to 7 o'clock starts. The additional changes is language and grammatical and typos that Valley and Maura found, and I'll take you through those page by page.
Craig, before you start on that, would you look at page 10?
I think that's supposed to be 9:20.
Is that supposed to be the yellow? Should that be 9:20?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
That's all right.
So I'll take you through the others. On page 3, Roman numeral 3, number 4, that's highlighted. That's just grammatical. On page 4, just below number 9, we added the word annually.
How did we miss that the first time?
You know, a lot of people have looked at this for a long time.
I know.
And
I mean, how many times have we approved it? Like,
yeah. Yeah.
Have they used that provision?
I don't believe so. They would go through community ed to schedule that, and Peter wasn't here last year, so I don't know if they have, if they used it or not.
Okay. Just curious.
In number 12, we added anywhere inside the fenced area. That was an issue. We had people who brought dogs into the concession area and actually up into the bleachers. We kind of combined 16 and 21, and we added the word vaping. On page 6, starting page 6, with the use of the public address PA system, we just consolidated. We used public address in one paragraph and PA in the next paragraph. So I think they're all consolidated now to say PA. Then there were, Maura found some other inconsistencies, and it goes back to, the inconsistencies are about, if you go to page 6, number 2 and 4, the ones that we just added, it refers back to this. So let me point out where those are. So on page 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th column, 2nd row, it says sunset to 8:05. That's just got to be a typo. It's supposed to be 8, so we'll need to change that to 8. And I'm
Does
not.
8 work? Right, because isn't it like they're done at 8, but they've got 20 minutes after that to get everybody and shut the lights off?
Well, the games go to 8, and then you're supposed to have the lights off 20 minutes later. So I think that is defining the game time.
Okay, because it's under, okay. Because for the other one, we have sunset to 9:20, which is game plus 20 minutes to turn the lights off.
Okay, so to be consistent, you want to go 8:20.
8:20, I mean, either way, but, I mean, I think if people are looking at this and saying, okay, there's a game, when can I expect the lights to be off? I think we probably want to put when they're going to go off.
And I would err on the side of adding the time, the 20 minutes to the table, so it doesn't create an expectation that by 8 all the lights are off.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so 8:20. In that case, we need to look at football. Football, what does football say on page 6?
I think it's right, because it says they'll be done at 8:30, and you've got 20 minutes to get the lights off at 8:50. So
Yep,
that
so
one.
8:50, yep, so that works. Practices. All right, so the other place is on page 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th column, 2nd row, 4:15 to 7:45. So that is referring to soccer. So soccer's going to start 6 to 8, so that 7:45 should be 8. This isn't the use of lights, right?
Probably the one that would be for field hockey. No, field hockey. No, for soccer, where we just said 9:20, so it should be 9 for game time.
Well, no, the triple headed, no, the
But why would, I
soccer,
mean,
it should say 8. So the games are going to end at 8, and the lights off 20 minutes later.
right, because we addressed the 3:30 to 9:20 down below for the triple headers, right?
So that should be 9:20, 8:20 as well. And I think,
Not to add confusion,
Yep.
but I think this one, I mean, you could get away with the end time of the, because the other one was like when are the lights going off. This says start to end. Like the game starts at 4:15, it ends at 8. And then you look over here and go, okay, the lights are out at 8:20.
well, but we just moved football to 9:20 instead, so.
But that's under the lights schedule, not under the start and. Oh, right, you did move it there too.
Yeah.
Whatever. I think we're probably spending too much. Right.
Yep.
Yep.
And I believe that's it.
I just had a quick question, and then I really have to run because I have kiddos in the back. I just wanted to ask if we could clarify on number 2 that was for high school.
Which 2?
Sorry, the new 2, for the triple header soccer games on page 6. So section 6A2.
So what's your question?
Can we clarify that it's high school, the Freeport High School triple header soccer games?
But do we have anybody else who would has 3 teams?
Well, I mean, you could have a triple header for. Yeah, I just thought that we were trying to specify it was for the high school. I don't know.
Like, is the definition of triple header
Soccer games.
all
yeah.
one sport, 3 teams?
Well, it says soccer.
It says soccer. The middle school doesn't play triple header.
You can just say high school, FHS high, yeah.
Yeah, I just, and I just wanted to ask that is first team, JV, and varsity, that's like pretty standard order, standard practice? Okay.
So, just let me clarify, so number 2, with the exception of high school triple header soccer games will start no later than 6. With the exception of
That works. Patty?
So I didn't sit here last time you guys brought this to the town, so you're bringing this to the town for them to look at it next, yes?
So they don't
Well,
have to approve it.
Right.
It's just
Oh, okay.
sort of an FYI, but we do have to go back for the approval for the PA system. So I'm guessing they're going to want to look at that section.
I'm just going to ask that instead of just sort of talking about the noise guy, that you bring whatever.
Oh, he's going to be there.
Oh, thank God.
Oh, yeah, he's,
I just don't want them to accuse
he's
us
coming
of a
with his
bait and
charts, his
switch.
color-coded.
The noise science guy.
The science guy will be there.
And Pat Carroll.
Bill Nye, the science guy, yeah. Yep.
I'm sorry, there is one more that Maura found, and that is on page,
Did you have a whiteboard going, Maura? Like, how you found all these?
this is page 10, and again, this refers back to page 6, where it says practices will end at 7:15, and on page 6, it says lights out at 7:30, and here it says 7:45, so we'll change 7:45 to 7:30 to reflect what it says earlier. Part of a condition of approval was that from the project review board is that we have this. And they looked at it, and part of the condition was to meet with the neighbors and come up with this plan.
So I have a couple of questions, and they're not related to the speakers, but if you go to page 5A2, last sentence ends with should be avoided during days of peak tourist traffic and when other large events are taking place in town. So this is about scheduling. Should we say should try to be avoided? Because I don't know if we can guarantee that we'll avoid that, but we can guarantee that we will try to avoid. Gives us a little more flexibility.
Well, so I coordinate with all the other events that are going on here, like what's going on in the FPAC, what's going on in the cafeteria. Is there a Taekwondo tournament going on all day that we have to avoid? Because of the town's ordinance, 250 people or greater gathering for an outdoor event, I have to meet with the police department. I don't have to fill out a permit request for every one of our night games, but I do give them the schedule so they have all of the dates. I sit down with them and say, this is what we got, what's on your, do you have a marathon that's going through town on any of these days? And so we actually do this. And one of the events happened this fall with the boys soccer playoff game on Halloween. And so with Halloween in town, we had a conversation with the police and the town manager, and for safety of the kids, we moved the start time to 7. I told the police if anybody complained, I'd send them to the police.
So that was just a suggestion. I mean, I could go either way, but I thought
And I
the
think
more
it's
flexibility, the better.
But it says should be avoided, but it doesn't say will be avoided, right? Like, so we should try.
Right.
I think your intent is probably picked up there, because I think it's a good one. It's a good point to try and not do those things. I'm already thinking about Brunswick on Father's Day weekend, when they're going to have the Trek Across Maine and a huge soccer tournament happening all in the same place, and I think it's going to be a nightmare. So they clearly didn't have this policy in place.
And the other question I had was for the same page 5, in number B5. where it says Freeport High School, notwithstanding these provisions, Freeport High School physical education, generally first academic period, and RCE fitness programs may use the facilities. Could we, and then the same thing, the same idea is echoed in C2, Freeport High School physical education and wellness classes may use the facility during school hours. That's the redundancy there, but I also wanted to bring up maybe making this statement more general and just say something along the lines of Freeport High School students supervised by an adult or by a staff, rather than pinpoint to physical education classes or wellness classes. There may be a science class that wants to be out there, or a club that needs to be out there. So as long as they're supervised and they're Freeport High School students, I think they should have access to the track during school hours.
The noise science sounds fascinating. I mean, they could.
I think there are plenty of other places that a science class could go outside and do whatever they're going to do, as opposed to not on the track and turf.
They want to see how much noise those turf absorbs.
You want to measure the decibels.
And I just put science as an example. I mean, it could be any class or
Yeah,
any other school group, as long as they're supervised, I think should have access to it.
It would be an easy one if we just struck through PE and or wellness and just say Freeport High School classes may use the facility.
Anybody have an issue with?
That sounds good to me.
Why not? Schools shall have use of the facility, because what if Moore Street wants to go out there and use it? So,
Oh,
Yeah, but
mean,
they don't
why just
start
the high
school
school?
until 9.
yeah. I think it's just for the early start time,
Yeah,
right?
because you're not supposed to start until 8, and our first classes starts at 7:50. By the time they get out there, it's going to be past 8 anyway.
But I guess the middle school might have a reason to go at some point, and so it could just read RSU 5 school. May use the facility.
But what the RCE, it's not even called RCE anymore.
Well, that's why I think if you say RSU 5 schools may use the facility, community ed is,
Are they?
it's under our umbrella. Sure. It's in our budget.
Well,
Entities, you could say entities.
Oh, how about
RFC 5
entities?
Entities.
Okay.
So notwithstanding these provisions, RSU 5 entities,
May use the facilities prior to 8
use-
on weekdays for non-competitive activities.
got it.
So that would also need to be in B5, Valley pointed out.
That's what I'm looking at. What are you
Yeah,
looking
that's
at?
what I was looking at.
We were reading from C2.
Oh.
So we just want to be consistent there.
So because we changed B5, maybe C2 needs to stay there, because that's specifically talking about use by the high school.
Right, that whole C is everything about the high school, so.
Oh, I see. Yep.
So are we back to no things starting later than 6 o'clock? No games starting later than 6 o'clock for the high school? Should that have some sort of reference to triple header, 7 o'clock?
Where does
I
it
mean-
say that?
C3.
No, because that's fully outlined. So that is when the lights are not in use. This number 5 is limitation on use of facility when use of field lights is not required. And I don't know even why that's there, but
I was to say, how does that change your timing of being able to have 3 games? So if it's like your first triple header in September, you might not need the lights, but you still might need to start the game at 7, right?
yeah, I don't know. You tell me what it should be at this point.
I'm not sure what the whole section is about, actually, on that C1, but.
C1.
Like, I mean, I'm not sure what this tells us that isn't somewhere else picked up.
It's telling you to reference table 2.
So A is scheduling and use, B is time constraints, so like you can't use it before or after certain times, right? C is the use by the high school, D is the use by the middle school, and it should probably be middle schools. And then E is community programs. I mean, we probably could strike all those now that we put it into B, but.
I think it's okay to be redundant.
Yeah, it's fine.
My last quick question was, do we need to specify how many games the middle schools are entitled to play?
That's in here.
I think it's.
No, I know it's there, but do we need to say that? What if we want to have one extra?
But I think it's specific to the
Really
lights.
negotiated.
I was going to say it was specific to the
It needs to be there, okay.
Yeah, they're only allowed one, well, they can play as many games as.
One on the turf.
Yeah, as
just
we
the
can put
lights.
them in, but they're only allowed, each eighth grade team is allowed one night under the lights. But if it's free, we can bring them all over here as many times as we want. Which we did this last spring. We brought or is it soccer? We brought the girls' middle school soccer team here because we had a conflict and didn't have a field, so, and this field was open.
I will tell you, my son was keenly aware that the Durham Middle School soccer game got bounced from the field for a playoff game for the varsity team. So they did not get to play under the lights.
Well, that's really the only time we have,
Heartbreaking,
because during the regular season, Monday through Friday, we're using it every day till 7:15. So the only time that we have time is when the end of the season comes around and the JVs aren't in postseason, and maybe some of our varsity aren't, and that frees up some time.
Yeah. I told him, suck it up, so.
I have a nitpicky grammar thing. There's a highlighted apostrophe S
I said the
there
same thing.
on page 3, and it should be S apostrophe.
Yes.
It's page 3, it's the only highlighted thing on the page.
It's apostrophe S, and I think it should be S apostrophe.
Yeah.
Because it's possessive multiple.
It probably wasn't possessive, and then it got made possessive, but it just needs to be plural.
Okay. All right, so, subject to those small grammar changes that come about, I'm sure those aren't things we need to address going forward, but, you know, the changes specific to the PA system, the position of the lights, adding some consistency and some more definition around the limitations. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Anybody have any additional questions? All those in favor? None opposed?
Thank you.
Thanks. And then just for informational purposes, Becky, when do we expect we're going to go to the town?
Oh, I was hoping you didn't ask.
Sorry.
Craig, do you remember the specific day? I had emailed Pat, and I haven't heard back.
Well, their next meeting is April 15th, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be on that agenda. It's up to them what agenda we go on, and so if it's not April, it'll be May.
Yeah.
So I will definitely, I have that on my list to include in a board update.
Okay.
So I'll let you all know, and you're welcome to attend.
All right. Public comment?
Bless you.
No one left, so I will take a motion to adjourn. Everybody's hand goes up. Maddie, Erica, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed? Thanks.